Rule 401, test for relevant evidence. Evidence is relevant if A, it has any tendency to make a fact more or less probable than it would be without the evidence. This is probative. And B, the fact is of consequence in determining the action, consequential. Under Rule 401, the objection irrelevant raises both concepts. The evidence does not tend to make more or less probable the fact is offered to establish, or the fact for which offered to establish is not itself of consequence in the litigation. Rule 402, general admissibility of relevant evidence. Relevant evidence is admissible unless any of the following provides otherwise: the United States Constitution, a federal statute, these rules, or other rules prescribed by SCOTUS. Irrelevant evidence is not admissible. Any tendency means any evidence having any tendency more than zero to make the existence of any fact that is of consequence to the determination of the action more or less probable than it would be without this evidence. Evidence, when direct or circumstantial, is relevant when it possesses any tendency to establish a fact of consequence. Whether evidence is relevant depends on possessing any tendency to make a fact of consequence more or less probable than it would be without the evidence, in light of logic, experience, and expected assumptions concerning human behavior. Fact of consequence. A fact of consequence describes a proposition which is in the case, and relevant describes evidence which has a tendency to prove or disprove a proposition. A fact of consequence includes three general categories of fact. 1, facts which comprise direct evidence of an element of a claim of defense. 2, facts from whose establishment may be inferred facts amounting to elements of claims or defenses. And 3, facts bearing circumstantially upon the evaluation of the probative value to be given to other evidence in the case. To determine relevance, always start by first asking, what fact are you offering the evidence to prove? Relevant evidence may be excluded under Rule 403. Rule 403. Excluding relevant evidence for prejudice, confusion, waste of time, or other reasons. The court may exclude relevant evidence if its probative value is substantially outweighed by a danger of one or more of the following: unfair prejudice, confusion of the issues, misleading the jury, or by consideration of undue delay, waste of time, or needless presentation of cumulative evidence. Unfair prejudice. Evidence that rises to the level of unfair prejudice has an unfair tendency to suggest a decision on an improper basis, commonly but not necessarily an emotional one, such as bias, sympathy, hatred, contempt, retribution, or horror. Confusion and misleading. The probability that certain proof and the answering of evidence that it provokes might unduly distract the jury from the main issues. Consideration of time. Sometimes evidence is excluded because an unsuitable amount of time would be consumed in presenting and clarifying the situation. Surprises. This is not included in Rule 403, but may still be justifiable despite procedural requirements of notice and the overall ability of pretrial discovery enforcement of discovery sanctions, or the granting of a continuance on the basis of balancing the harm caused against the incremental probative value of the evidence.